Dear listener, welcome once more to the Hercule Poirot Story Podcast, where the little gray cells unravel the most perplexing enigmas of the human soul. Tonight, we invite you to immerse yourself in a tale of shadowed secrets and crimson betrayal, bloody footprints at dusk. As you settle in to rest, let the soft rhythm of the words carry you away from the cares of the day. Each story is a companion for the night, guiding you gently toward peace, calm, and sleep. Now, close your eyes, breathe deeply, and allow yourself to drift into this world of cozy mystery and quiet delight.
Chapter 1. The Gathering Storm. The wind screamed through the jagged spires of Blackwood Manor, perched atop a desolate bluff in rural Devonshire, its ancient stones battered by centuries of salt and storm. It was September 1935, and the English Channel churned below, a restless beast of froth and shadow under a sky bruised with purples and grays. Rain lashed the manor's leaded windows, each gust a harbinger of the tempest brewing within as much as without. Hercule Poirot, the diminutive Belgian detective, with his impeccably waxed moustaches and dove-gray suit, stood at the threshold of this foreboding estate, his eyes gleaming with the quiet intensity of a man who sensed intrigue before it unveiled itself. The gravel drive crunched beneath his polished shoes as he alighted from the chauffeured Rolls-Royce, its engine purring softly against the gale. Poirot adjusted his Homburg hat, shielding it from the wind's greedy fingers, and surveyed the manor. Blackwood was a relic of feudal grandeur. Ivy clung to its turrets like a desperate lover, and its gargoyles leered from the eaves, their stone faces weathered into grotesque smirks. The invitation to this remote domain had come from Sir Reginald Harrington, a steel magnate whose wealth was rumored to teeter on the edge of ruin. Ostensibly, Poirot was here for a weekend symposium on European trade, but his little gray cells whispered of ulterior motives. Man like Sir Reginald did not summon the world's greatest detective for mere discourse. Sir Reginald greeted him at the grand oak doors, his florid face a mask of forced joviality. A man of 52, broad-shouldered and barrel-chested, with silver hair swept back and eyes like polished agates, he exuded the bluff confidence of a captain of industry. Yet beneath the hearty handshake and booming laugh, Poirot detected a tremor, an anxiety that flickered in the man's gaze like a candle in a draught. "Monsieur Poirot, a delight to welcome you to Blackwood," Sir Reginald bellowed, clapping Poirot's shoulder with a vigor that betrayed unease. "Come, meet the others. A fine company we have tonight." The drawing-room was a cavern of opulence, its walls draped in crimson damask, the firelight casting long shadows across ancestral portraits, whose stern eyes seemed to follow every movement. A chandelier of Waterford crystal glittered overhead, its prisms refracting the glow into a kaleidoscope of warmth. Poirot's arrival drew the attention of the assembled guests, a tableau of characters as varied as they were suspicious, each poised on the cusp of a drama yet to unfold. Lady Eleanor Harrington, Sir Reginald's wife, rose from a velvet settee with the grace of a wraith. At 45, she was a vision of ethereal beauty, tall and slender, with porcelain skin and raven hair swept into an elegant chignon. Her emerald eyes held a melancholy depth, as though guarding secrets too heavy to voice. Rumors in London salons painted her as a stifled artist, her youthful dreams of painting crushed beneath the weight of matrimonial duty. Poirot noted the delicate tremor in her hand as she offered it, her smile polite but brittle. "Monsieur Poirot, your reputation precedes you," she murmured, her voice soft, yet resonant, like a cello played in a minor key. Psychologically, she was a study in restraint, a woman of suppressed passions, perhaps yearning for freedom. Motive? A substantial inheritance, or perhaps a whispered affair that promised escape from her domineering husband. Beside her stood Arthur Harrington, the couple's only son, a lanky youth of 28 with disheveled auburn locks and a scowl etched into his handsome features. His dinner jacket was rumpled, a stark contrast to his father's tailored elegance, and his eyes darted with the restless energy of a caged animal. Arthur's life was a tapestry of dissipation, gambling dens, unpaid debts, and paternal disapproval. "Arthur insists on these dreary gatherings," he muttered to Poirot, his tone laced with sarcasm as he swirled a glass of whiskey. "As if tariffs will mend our fortunes." Psychologically, he was a cauldron of resentment, his motives tangled in financial desperation and filial rebellion. Could such bitterness drive a son to darker deeds? Mr. Victor Lang, Sir Reginald's business partner, cut a lean, wiry figure, his sharp features accentuated by wire-rimmed spectacles and a neatly trimmed beard that did little to soften his calculating demeanor. At 52, Lang was a man of ledgers and logic, his mind a fortress of profit and loss. "Industry is a battlefield, Monsieur Poirot," he confided over a glass of port, his voice clipped and precise. Recent whispers in Birmingham's financial circles spoke of a rift between the partners. Sir Reginald's alleged embezzlement of company funds had cost Lang dearly. His motives simmered in revenge, a cold dish served with a smile. Poirot noted his steady hands, betraying no nerves, but his eyes flicked too often toward Sir Reginald, like a predator sizing its prey.
The household staff added further layers to the unfolding drama. Eliza Thorne, the maid, was a sturdy woman of 35, her mousy brown hair pinned severely, her broad face freckled and perpetually furrowed. She moved with the quiet efficiency of one accustomed to invisibility, yet her eyes burned with a quiet intensity when they lingered on Sir Reginald. Psychologically, she harbored a deep grudge, years of menial toil under a tyrannical master, compounded by the dismissal of her sister from service, a wound that festered into vengeance. "The master demands perfection," she whispered to Poirot while serving tea, her hands trembling slightly, betraying either fear or suppressed rage. Her motive? Retribution for past injustices, perhaps cloaked in subservience. Tom Wilkins, the gardener, loomed in the periphery, a hulking figure of 40, with weathered skin and calloused hands that spoke of relentless labor. His eyes, dark as storm clouds, avoided direct contact, and his taciturn nature masked a turbulent past. Rumors swirled of a youthful conviction for poaching, and a deeper grudge, Sir Reginald's eviction of Wilkins's family from estate lands years prior. "Grounds need tending, rain or shine," he grunted when Poirot inquired about his duties, his voice rough as gravel. Psychologically, Wilkins was a man of buried anger, his motives rooted in loss and betrayal. Could such a man channel his strength into something more sinister? As the group conversed amid the clink of crystal and the howl of wind outside, Poirot observed the undercurrents. Arthur's furtive glances at his mother, Lang's pointed barbs veiled as jests, Eliza's lingering stares, and Wilkins' abrupt departures to the garden. The air hummed with unspoken tensions, each guest a thread in a tapestry of deceit Poirot was determined to unravel. Dinner unfolded in the Manor's cavernous dining hall, where candlelight danced upon silverware and ancestral portraits frowned from gilt frames. Sir Reginald dominated the discourse, expounding on economic perils with bombastic fervor, his voice filling the room like thunder. "The continent teeters on chaos, mark my words," he declared, brandishing a fork for emphasis. Poirot interjected with polite inquiries, each question a scalpel, probing deeper motives. "One must always question the why, no?" he remarked, his eyes twinkling as he sipped his claret, noting the reactions his words elicited. But as the clock struck 9, discord erupted like a crack in fine porcelain. Arthur, flushed with wine, rose unsteadily, his voice sharp with accusation. "You've squandered our legacy on foolhardy ventures, father," he spat, his glass trembling in his hand. The room fell silent, the only sound the relentless patter of rain against the windows. Sir Reginald's face darkened, his eyes narrowing to slits. "Insolent pup!" he roared, slamming his fist on the table, rattling the cutlery. Lady Eleanor intervened, her voice tremulous yet firm. "Please, Arthur, Reginald, let us not ruin the evening." Her plea hung in the air, fragile as spun glass. Lang smirked into his napkin, a predator sensing blood, while Eliza, serving port, spilled a drop, her face paling as though she'd glimpsed a ghost. Wilkins, visible through the window tending lanterns in the storm, paused to stare inward, his expression inscrutable. The party dispersed after dinner, each retreating to their private sanctuaries. Sir Reginald announced his intention to retire to his study, a sanctum of leather-bound tomes and antique curios, including a prized dagger from his colonial exploits, a curved blade of Damascus steel etched with arcane symbols. Poirot, feigning fatigue, declined a game of billiards with Arthur and instead wandered the corridors, committing the manor's layout to memory. The study's French doors opened onto the garden, where muddy paths gleamed under sporadic moonlight, a detail Poirot filed away with meticulous care. At 10:30, a piercing scream shattered the night, Lady Eleanor's cry from the upper landing, sharp enough to cut through the storm's din. Poirot, closest to the study, was first to arrive, his patent-leather shoes clicking on the polished floor. The sight that greeted him was one of horror. Sir Reginald slumped over his desk, the antique dagger buried to its hilt in his chest, a pool of blood congealing on the Persian rug. Bloody footprints, distinct masculine bootprints, trailed from the body to the French doors, vanishing into the rain-sodden garden. The method of death was clear, a single, savage stab to the heart, inflicted with intimate fury. Poirot knelt beside the body, his gloved fingers hovering over the scene. Mon Dieu, the footprints. They are fresh, yet the rain has not yet erased them entirely. And regarde, the desk drawer ajar, papers rifled. A robbery or a ruse? Arthur arrived, his face ashen, followed by Lang, whose spectacles glinted in the firelight. Eliza hovered at the door, wringing her apron, while Wilkins, summoned from the grounds, tracked mud across the threshold, his boots suspiciously akin to the prince. The local constable was summoned, a ruddy-faced man out of his depth, but Poirot's reputation secured his authority. "We must preserve the scene," he declared, his voice calm yet commanding. "Each of you, recount your whereabouts at 10 o'clock. Alibis emerged, each laced with potential deceit. Lady Eleanor claimed she was in her boudoir, reading. Arthur insisted he was in the billiard room with a cigar. Lang said he was perusing accounts in the library. Eliza was in the kitchen preparing tomorrow's breakfast. Wilkins swore he was in the potting shed, sharpening tools. Poirot's eyes narrowed as he absorbed their words, noting inconsistencies. Arthur's billiard room bore no trace of cigar ash, and Lang's book lay unopened on the library table. The footprints, too, were a puzzle, too pristine for the deluge outside, suggesting they were made after the rain had briefly paused. And the rifled drawer? A will, perhaps, or a document of betrayal. As the constable cordoned the study, Poirot stepped onto the terrace,
the wind tugging at his coat. The garden path, slick with mud, revealed no further footprints, but a scrap of emerald silk, matching Lady Eleanor's gown, caught on a rosebush. A clue or a plant? The little gray cells hummed, piecing together the mosaic of motives. Money for Arthur, revenge for Lang and Eliza, betrayal for Lady Eleanor, and for Wilkins, a grudge as old as the manor itself. The storm raged on, its fury mirroring the chaos within Blackwood Manor. Poirot returned inside, his mind a whirl of possibilities. "The truth," he murmured to himself. "It hides in the shadows of human nature, but Hercule Poirot shall bring it to light." The night was young, and the game had only begun.
Chapter 2. The Fatal Evening. The dining hall of Blackwood Manor glowed with the flickering warmth of a dozen candelabra, their flames casting trembling shadows across the polished mahogany table and the stern visages of ancestral portraits lining the walls. The storm outside raged unabated, its relentless howl punctuated by thunder that rattled the leaded windows, as if the heavens themselves were complicit in the drama unfolding within. It was September 1935, and Hercule Poirot, seated at the right hand of Sir Reginald Harrington, sipped his claret with the measured precision of a man attuned to every nuance of the evening. His dove-gray suit was immaculate, his mustaches a testament to meticulous care, but his emerald eyes darted from face to face, cataloguing the undercurrents of tension that swirled like the wine in his glass. Sir Reginald presided over the table with the bombast of a general, his florid face flushed with the vigor of his discourse. "The continent is a powder keg, gentlemen," he boomed, brandishing a silver fork as though it were a scepter. "Germany's rearmament, the Italians' posturing. Mark my words, trade routes will be the battleground of the next war." His guests, an eclectic assembly of motives and masks, nodded or murmured assent, though their eyes betrayed private agendas. Poirot, ever the observer, interjected with a deceptively mild question. "And you, Sir Reginald, how do you safeguard your empire of steel amidst such turmoil?" The query was polite, but its edge probed deeper, seeking the fault lines beneath the magnate's bravado. Lady Eleanor Harrington, seated opposite Poirot, offered a faint smile, her emerald eyes catching the candlelight like fractured gems. Her raven hair, swept into a chignon, framed a face of porcelain delicacy, yet the slight tremor in her fingers as she lifted her glass hinted at a soul in quiet turmoil. At 45, she was a study in suppressed elegance, her artistic spirit rumored to chafe against the confines of her husband's domineering nature. "Reginald has always been adept at navigating storms," she said, her voice a soft melody laced with an undercurrent of irony. Poirot noted the way her gaze lingered on her husband, not with affection, but with a complex blend of resignation and defiance. Could her motive lie in the promise of freedom or the allure of a vast inheritance? Arthur Harrington, the couple's son, slouched in his chair, his auburn hair disheveled and his dinner jacket creased from neglect. At 28, he bore the hallmarks of a wastrel, eyes bloodshot from too much whiskey, hands restless with the agitation of a man drowning in debts. "Father's empire," he muttered, his voice thick with sarcasm, "built on the backs of men like me, who'll inherit nothing but his scorn." The table stilled, the clink of cutlery pausing, as eyes turned to him. Sir Reginald's face darkened, but before he could retort, Poirot interjected smoothly. "Monsieur Arthur, you speak with passion, but surely youth has its own empire to forge, no?" The question was a gentle prod, yet it elicited a scowl from Arthur, whose psychological profile Poirot had already begun to sketch. Resentment,
desperation, and a hunger for validation. Motive? A son scorned might turn to drastic measures to claim his due. Mr. Victor Lang, Sir Reginald's business partner, sat with the precision of a ledger-keeper, his wiry frame and sharp features accentuated by wire-rimmed spectacles that glinted in the candlelight. His neatly trimmed beard did little to soften the calculating edge of his demeanor. At 52, Lang was a man of cold ambition, his mind a fortress of numbers and grudges. "Empires rise and fall on vigilance," he said, his voice clipped as he addressed Poirot's earlier question. "Reginald and I have weathered many storms, but betrayal in business cuts deeper than any market crash." The barb was subtle, veiled as general wisdom, but Poirot caught the glance Lang shot at Sir Reginald, a flicker of accusation. Rumors of embezzlement, of shares siphoned from Lang's stake, painted a motive as clear as the crystal goblet before him: revenge, served with the patience of a chess master. Eliza Thorne, the maid, moved silently around the table, her sturdy frame clad in a starched apron, her mousy brown hair pinned with severe precision. Her broad, freckled face was a mask of deference, but her eyes, dark and burning, betrayed a simmering intensity as she poured port for the guests. At 35, she was a woman hardened by years of menial toil under Sir Reginald's exacting standards. Poirot had overheard whispers in the servants' quarters. Her sister, dismissed unjustly years ago, had died in poverty, a wound that fueled Eliza's quiet rage. "The master demands perfection," she had murmured to Poirot earlier, her hands trembling as she set down a teapot. Now, as she served, a drop of port spilled, staining the tablecloth like a blood omen. Her face paled, and she retreated to the shadows, but not before Poirot noted her motive: vengeance for a sister's ruin, cloaked in subservience. Tom Wilkins, the gardener, was absent from the table, his duties confining him to the storm-lashed grounds. Poirot glimpsed him through the dining hall's windows, a hulking silhouette tending lanterns in the rain. At 40, Wilkins was a man of weathered strength, his skin bronzed by sun and wind, his hands calloused from labor. His storm-cloud eyes avoided contact, and his taciturn nature masked a past shadowed by a poaching conviction and a deeper grudge: Sir Reginald's eviction of his family from estate lands. Poirot had noted his grunt of a response earlier: "Grounds need tending, rain or shine." Psychologically, Wilkins was a volcano, dormant but smoldering, his motive rooted in loss and betrayal. Could such a man wield his strength for murder? As the meal progressed, the conversation grew strained, each guest a player in a game of veiled barbs and forced civility. Poirot, ever the maestro of human nature, steered the discourse with questions that seemed innocuous but cut to the bone. "Lady Eleanor, do you find solace in the arts amidst such turbulent times?" he asked, prompting a wistful smile from her. "Once, perhaps, but duty leaves little room for dreams," she replied. Arthur snorted, earning a sharp glance from his father, while Lang's lips twitched in a knowing smirk. The air thickened with unspoken resentments, the storm outside a mirror to the gathering tempest within. At precisely 9 o'clock, the tension snapped. Arthur, emboldened by wine, rose unsteadily, his voice slicing through the room's hum. "You've ruined us, father," he shouted, his glass trembling. "Your reckless speculations, our legacy is ashes." The accusation hung like a guillotine, silencing the table. Sir Reginald's face purpled, his fist slamming the table, rattling silverware. "Insolent pup," he roared. "You dare lecture me, you who squander thousands at the tables? You'll inherit nothing if you persist in this folly." Lady Eleanor's hand fluttered to her throat, her voice a desperate plea. "Please, let us not descend into chaos." But the damage was done. Lang's eyes gleamed with predatory interest. Eliza froze mid-step, and Wilkins, visible through the window, paused, his lantern casting an eerie glow on his impassive face.
The party dispersed soon after, the air heavy with discord. Sir Reginald announced his retreat to his study, a sanctum of leather-bound tomes and colonial relics, including a prized dagger of Damascus steel, its blade etched with arcane symbols, a detail Poirot had noted during his earlier tour of the manor. "I've papers to review," Sir Reginald muttered, his tone curt as he strode from the room. Lady Eleanor excused herself to her boudoir, claiming a headache, while Arthur stormed toward the billiard room, muttering about needing a cigar. Lang retired to the library, ostensibly to peruse accounts, and Eliza vanished to the kitchen, her apron clutched tightly. Wilkins returned to the garden, his silhouette swallowed by the storm. Poirot, feigning fatigue, declined Arthur's half-hearted invitation to billiards, and instead wandered the manor's corridors, his mind mapping the layout with surgical precision. The study's French doors, opening onto the garden, were a focal point. Muddy paths glistened under sporadic moonlight, and the lock appeared flimsy, easily forced. The corridors were a labyrinth of oak paneling and faded tapestries, each corner a potential hiding place for secrets. Poirot's little gray cells hummed, cataloging details, a creaking floorboard, a draft from an unseen window, the faint scent of tobacco lingering where none should be. At 10:30, the night shattered. A scream, Lady Eleanor's, raw and piercing, tore through the manor from the upper landing. Poirot, nearest the study, reached it in moments, his patent leather shoes clicking on the polished floor. The sight that greeted him was a tableau of horror. Sir Reginald slumped over his desk, the Damascus dagger buried in his chest, a crimson pool spreading across the Persian rug. Bloody footprints, distinct, masculine and heavy, trailed from the body to the French doors, vanishing into the rain-soaked garden. The stab was precise, a single thrust to the heart, delivered with intimate fury. Poirot knelt, his gloved fingers hovering over the scene. "Mon Dieu," he murmured. "The footprints, they are fresh, yet the rain has not fully erased them. And regardez, the desk drawer, ajar, papers rifled. A robbery or a ruse?" Arthur stumbled in, his face ashen, whiskey glass still in hand. Lang followed, his spectacles glinting, his expression unreadable. Eliza hovered at the door, wringing her apron, her eyes wide with shock or guilt. Wilkins, summoned from the grounds, tracked mud across the threshold, his boots eerily similar to the prints. Lady Eleanor, last to arrive, clutched the doorframe, her face pale as moonlight. The local constable, a flustered man named Burrows, arrived shortly after, his authority yielding to Poirot's reputation. "We must preserve the scene," Poirot declared, his voice calm yet commanding. "Each of you, state your whereabouts at 10 o'clock. Alibis poured forth, each a thread in a tangled web. Lady Eleanor in her boudoir, reading. Arthur in the billiard room, smoking. Lang in the library, studying accounts. Eliza in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. Wilkins in the potting shed, sharpening tools." Poirot's eyes narrowed as he listened, noting discrepancies. The billiard room bore no trace of cigar ash, contradicting Arthur's claim. Lang's book, when Poirot later checked, lay unopened, its pages pristine. Eliza's hands, though trembling, were stained with what appeared to be beetroot juice from dinner preparations. Wilkins' boots matched the prints, yet he swore he'd been in the shed, his alibi supported by a villager's testimony.
Too convenient, perhaps. And Lady Eleanor's boudoir, Poirot recalled, was directly above the study, accessible by a servant's stair. Stepping onto the terrace, Poirot examined the garden path. The footprints, oddly pristine despite the rain, suggested they were made during a brief lull in the storm. A scrap of emerald silk, matching Lady Eleanor's gown, caught on a rosebush. A clue or a deliberate misdirection? The rifled drawer held a will, partially visible, naming Arthur as heir, but only if he reformed his ways. A letter, crumpled nearby, hinted at Lang's embezzlement, a secret Sir Reginald had uncovered. As the constable secured the study, Poirot stood in the rain, his coat flapping like a raven's wings. The storm mirrored the chaos within, each guest a suspect, with motives as varied as the manor's shadows. Money for Arthur, revenge for Lang and Eliza, betrayal for Lady Eleanor, and for Wilkins, a grudge as deep as the Devon soil. The truth, Poirot murmured. It hides in the dance of motives, but Hercule Poirot shall lead it into the light. The fatal evening had ended, but the game of deduction had only begun.
Chapter 3. Shadows of Suspicion. Dawn broke over Blackwood Manor like a reluctant confession, its feeble light piercing the storm's lingering veil to reveal a landscape sodden and desolate. The rain had softened to a drizzle, but the air remained heavy with the scent of wet earth and foreboding. Inside the manor, the atmosphere was no less oppressive, the weight of Sir Reginald Harrington's murder pressing upon its inhabitants like a physical force. Hercule Poirot, his dove-grey suit as pristine as ever despite the sleepless night, stood in the morning room, his emerald eyes scanning the gathered suspects with the precision of a jeweler assessing flawed gems. The little grey cells, as he so often called his formidable intellect, were already weaving the threads of evidence into a tapestry of suspicion. The morning room, with its tall windows in faded chintz curtains, offered a stark contrast to the opulence of the dining hall. Its furnishings were modest, almost austere, as though the manor's grandeur had been reserved for public display. A fire crackled in the grate, doing little to dispel the chill that clung to the room. Poirot had requested the household assemble here for interrogations, a setting intimate enough to unsettle, yet formal enough to maintain order. The suspects sat in a semicircle, their faces a gallery of unease. Lady Eleanor Harrington, pale and composed; Arthur Harrington, slouched and sullen; Victor Lang, rigid with calculation; Eliza Thorne, fidgeting with her apron; and Tom Wilkins, looming like a storm cloud at the room's edge. Poirot began with Lady Eleanor, his voice as smooth as velvet, yet edged with steel. "Madame, you were in your boudoir at the time of the murder, oui? Reading, you said. Yet the servant's stair connects your room directly to the study. A convenient path, perhaps, for one seeking discretion." His words were a gentle probe, but they struck a nerve. Lady Eleanor's eyes widened, then narrowed, her hands clasping tightly in her lap. "I was reading, Monsieur Poirot," she insisted, her tone brittle. "I had no reason to descend to the study. Reginald and I, we had our differences, but I loved him once." Her voice cracked on the last word, a fissure in her composure that revealed a woman wrestling with grief or guilt. Poirot's gaze lingered, noting the psychological layers. A suppressed artist, bound by duty, her melancholy a mask for deeper passions. The emerald silk scrap found in the garden gnawed at his thoughts, torn from her gown, perhaps, during a struggle. Yet her delicate slippers bore no trace of mud, and her alibi, though convenient, was uncontradicted by the other servants. A red herring, or a clue to her innocence. "Merci, madame," Poirot said, dismissing her with a nod, his mind already turning to the next thread. Arthur Harrington was next, his lanky frame slumping further as Poirot approached. "Monsieur Arthur, you claim the billiard room as your refuge, with a cigar for company. Yet I find no ash, no scent of tobacco there. Curious, no?" Poirot's tone was almost playful, but his eyes were unrelenting.
Arthur's scowl deepened, his hands fidgeting with a cufflink. "One missing," Poirot noted, recalling his similar item found in the garden. "I smoked. I swear it," he muttered, his voice thick with defiance. Perhaps the wind carried the ash away. A weak defense, and Poirot pressed further. "And your debts, monsieur. Thousands owed to unsavory lenders. Your father's will, I understand, hinges on your reform. A motive most compelling, perhaps." Arthur's face flushed, his eyes darting to his mother, who looked away. "I didn't kill him," he snapped. "Yes, I argued with him, but murder? Preposterous." Psychologically, Arthur was a storm of impulsivity and resentment, his desperation for funds a glaring motive. Yet a housemaid's testimony placed him near the study at 10, contradicting his claim of solitude. Poirot filed this away, noting the tremor in Arthur's hands, a sign of guilt or merely fear. Victor Lang followed, his wiry frame rigid as he adjusted his spectacles. "Monsieur Lang, you were in the library, perusing accounts, oui? Yet the book you claimed to read lies unopened, its pages pristine. And a handkerchief, monogrammed V.L., was found near the footprints. Careless for a man so vigilant." Lang's lips twitched, a flicker of unease beneath his composed facade. "The handkerchief was stolen from my room," he said coolly. "As for the book, I was distracted by other matters. Reginald's mismanagement, for instance. He swindled me out of half my shares. The accusation was delivered with the precision of a scalpel, revealing a motive rooted in financial betrayal. Psychologically, Lang was a chess player, his every move calculated, his gaze unflinching. But was he too calculated to commit so passionate a crime? Eliza Thorne. The maid trembled as Poirot turned to her. "Mademoiselle Thorne, you were in the kitchen, preparing breakfast, you say. Yet your apron bears stains. Beetroot juice, perhaps, but mistaken at first as blood. And your sister's dismissal, a tragedy most profound. Did it fuel a desire for retribution?" Her freckled face paled, her hands twisting the apron into knots. "I loved my sister, sir," she whispered, her voice raw. "The master cast her out, and she died penniless. But I swear I was in the kitchen. The juice, it's from dinner prep." Her eyes, brimming with tears, suggested sincerity, but Poirot noted her psychological profile. A woman of quiet rage, her deference a mask for vengeance. The beetroot stain was a convenient alibi, but was it too convenient?
Tom Wilkins, the gardener, was last, his hulking frame filling the doorway. "Monsieur Wilkins, your boots match the bloody prints precisely," Poirot said, his tone matter-of-fact. "And your grudge against Sir Reginald, your family's eviction from these lands, is well known. Yet you claim the potting shed as your alibi. A villager corroborates this, but alibis can be bought, no?" Wilkins' storm-cloud eyes met Poirot's for the first time, a spark of defiance flaring. "I was sharpening tools," he grunted. "Boots like mine are common round here. Someone's framing me." His psychological profile was one of buried anger, his hands trembling with recent exertion or fear. Poirot noted a torn cuff on his coat, its fabric matching a scrap found near the footprints. A plant or a careless mistake? With interrogations concluded, Poirot stepped into the garden, the drizzle dampening his coat as he retraced the bloody footprints. They led to a hedgerow, then abruptly ceased, as though the killer had vanished into the air. "Impossible," Poirot murmured, his fingers brushing the muddy path. A cufflink engraved with an A lay half-buried, a match for Arthur's missing one, but too obvious, perhaps a deliberate misdirection. The emerald silk scrap near the rosebush gnawed at him still, Lady Eleanor's gown torn in haste, yet her composure suggested a subtler hand. Inside, Poirot examined the study more closely. The rifled drawer revealed a will, naming Arthur heir only if he reformed, a condition unmet, given his debts. A crumpled letter, half-burnt in the fireplace, accused Lang of embezzlement, a secret Sir Reginald had leveraged. Physical evidence mounted, a smudge of beetroot juice on the study's doorframe, suggesting Eliza's presence. A muddy boot print, unmistakably Wilkins, near the French doors, and a faint perfume, Lady Eleanor's lavender, lingering in the air. Psychological clues were equally telling. Arthur's impulsivity, Lang's cold calculation, Eliza's suppressed rage, Wilkins' brute strength, and Lady Eleanor's masked melancholy. Poirot paced the terrace, the drizzle clinging to his moustaches. The footprints were too pristine, suggesting they were staged after the rain paused, a clever ruse to implicate Wilkins. But who had access to his boots? The shed was unlocked, a detail Wilkins had not contested. And the dagger, why choose so distinctive a weapon? It pointed to intimacy, to someone within the household who knew its significance. As noon approached, Poirot summoned the suspects to the drawing-room, his mind a whirl of possibilities. "Mes amis," he said, his voice a calm anchor in the storm, "each of you carries a shadow of suspicion, but the truth, it lies in the details, the footprints, the silk, the rifled papers. Hercule Poirot sees all, and soon the killer shall be revealed." The suspects exchanged glances, each face a mask of fear, defiance, or calculation. Lady Eleanor's fingers tightened on her shawl, Arthur's scowl deepened, Lang's spectacles glinted, Eliza's apron twisted, and Wilkins' eyes darkened. The storm had passed, but the shadows of suspicion grew longer, and Poirot knew the game was far from over.
Chapter 4. Veils of Deception. The drizzle had ceased by midday, leaving Blackwood Manor cloaked in a damp, oppressive stillness that seemed to seep into its very stones. The sky hung low, a canvas of sullen gray, as if mourning the tragedy that had unfolded within the manor's ancient walls. Hercule Poirot, his dove-gray suit unmarred by the morning's exertions, stood in the corridor outside Sir Reginald Harrington's study, his emerald eyes tracing the faint outline of the bloody footprints that led to the garden. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and the lingering perfume of lavender, Lady Eleanor's signature, a detail that gnawed at his little gray cells. The murder of Sir Reginald, stabbed through the heart with his own Damascus dagger, was no mere act of passion. It was a performance, staged with meticulous care to obscure the truth. And Poirot, ever the maestro of human nature, was determined to peel back the veils of deception that shrouded the killer's identity. The manor's corridors, lined with oak paneling and faded tapestries, felt like a labyrinth of secrets, each corner hiding a whisper of betrayal. Poirot's morning interrogations had yielded a tapestry of motives, money, revenge, betrayal, but the clues were tangled, each suspect a master of misdirection. Lady Eleanor's melancholy elegance, Arthur's reckless desperation, Victor Lang's cold calculation, Eliza Thorne's simmering rage, and Tom Wilkins' buried grudges formed a constellation of suspicion, yet none shone clearly as the culprit. The bloody footprints, too pristine for the storm's deluge, suggested a staged scene, and the rifled desk drawer hinted at a motive beyond mere violence. Poirot's task was to separate the red herrings from the truth, and the afternoon promised revelations. He began in the study, where the constable had cordoned off the crime scene with a clumsy rope barrier. The room was a sanctum of Sir Reginald's power, its leather-bound tomes and colonial relics a testament to his domineering presence. The Damascus dagger, now removed by the constable for evidence, had left a crimson stain on the Persian rug, its edges curling like a grim halo around the spot where Sir Reginald had fallen. Poirot knelt, his gloved fingers hovering over the desk. The rifled desk drawer, partially ajar, revealed a will, Arthur as heir contingent on reform, and a half-burned letter accusing Victor Lang of embezzling company funds. But a new discovery caught Poirot's eye. A hidden compartment in the desk, forced open, its contents missing save for a single sheet,
a ledger page listing payments to an unknown party, initialed E.T. Eliza Thorne, or another deception? Poirot's gaze shifted to the French doors, their glass streaked with rain. The footprints, unmistakably masculine, led to the garden, but their clarity puzzled him. The rain, it should have blurred them, he murmured. Stepping onto the terrace, the muddy path revealed no further prints, but a torn cufflink, engraved with an A, lay near the rosebush, alongside the emerald silk scrap from Lady Eleanor's gown. Too obvious, he thought, a deliberate plant to implicate Arthur. But who had placed it, and why? Returning inside, Poirot sought out Eliza Thorne in the kitchen, where she was scrubbing pots with a ferocity that suggested she was purging more than grease. Her broad freckled face was set in a mask of concentration, but her eyes flicked nervously as Poirot entered. "Miss Mademoiselle Thorne," he began, his voice smooth as silk. "The ledger in Sir Reginald's desk, initials E.T., were these payments to you, perhaps, or a relative?" Eliza's hands froze, the scrub brush dripping suds onto the stone floor. "I know nothing of ledgers," she said, her voice tight. "I'm just a maid, sir." But her psychological profile betrayed her. Years of toil under Sir Reginald's tyranny, coupled with her sister's tragic dismissal, had forged a quiet rage. The beetroot stains on her apron, mistaken for blood, were a convenient alibi, but Poirot noted a fresh smudge on her sleeve, mud, not juice, suggesting she'd been in the garden. "Curious," Poirot said, his tone light but piercing. "The mud on your sleeve, it matches the garden path. Were you there last night, perhaps, near the study?" Eliza's face paled, her hands twisting the apron. I went to fetch herbs after dinner," she stammered. "The rain caught me, that's all." A plausible excuse, but her trembling betrayed fear or guilt. Poirot let her go, filing the detail away. Eliza's motive was vengeance, but her deference suggested she lacked the boldness for murder. Or did it? Next, Poirot sought Victor Lang in the library, where he sat surrounded by ledgers, his spectacles glinting like a predator's eyes. "Monsieur Lang," Poirot began, "the ledger in Sir Reginald's desk accuses you of embezzlement, a motive most compelling, no? And your handkerchief, found near the footprints, stolen, you say." Lang's lips twitched, a flicker of irritation beneath his composed facade. "Reginald was the thief," he snapped, "siphoning my shares for his reckless ventures. As for the handkerchief, anyone could have taken it from my room." His psychological profile was one of cold calculation, a man who played the long game. But the unopened book from his alibi gnawed at Poirot. Lang's claim of reading was a lie, suggesting he was elsewhere at 10. "And where were you truly at the hour of the murder?" Poirot pressed. Lang's eyes narrowed. "In the library, as I said, alone." The lie hung in the air, a red herring Poirot would unravel later. Arthur was in the billiard room, nursing a whiskey despite the early hour. His rumpled jacket and bloodshot eyes painted a picture of dissipation, but his scowl was defiant as Poirot approached. "Monsieur Arthur, the cufflink in the garden, yours, I presume, and your alibi, it lacks the scent of cigar smoke. Where were you at 10? Arthur's hand tightened on his glass, his knuckles white. "I told you, I was here," he growled. "The cufflink, I lost it days ago. Someone's framing me, like they framed Wilkins with those prints." His psychological profile was a storm of impulsivity and desperation, his debts a noose tightening around his future. The will's condition, that he reform or lose his inheritance, was a motive as clear as the whiskey in his hand. But the housemaid's testimony, placing him near the study, suggested more than a lost cufflink.
Lady Eleanor was in her boudoir, a sanctuary of pastel silks and delicate furniture, her lavender perfume heavy in the air. She sat at a vanity,
brushing her raven hair with mechanical precision, her emerald eyes distant. "Madame," Poirot said, his voice gentle yet probing, "the silk scrap in the garden, it matches your gown, and your boudoir so close to the study via the servant's stair. Did you descend last night?" Her brush paused, her reflection in the mirror a mask of composure. "I was here, Monsieur Poirot," she said softly. "The silk, perhaps it caught when I walked the garden earlier. As for Reginald, I had no cause to harm him." But her psychological profile revealed a woman of suppressed passions, her melancholy a veneer for deeper desires. A diary, glimpsed on her vanity, hinted at suicidal thoughts masked by stoicism, and rumors of a Parisian lover suggested a motive, freedom from a tyrannical husband. Tom Wilkins was in the potting shed, sharpening a scythe with rhythmic strokes, his hulking frame filling the cramped space. "Monsieur Wilkins," Poirot said, stepping into the shed's earthy gloom, "your boots match the prints, yet you claim innocence. The shed is unlocked. Anyone could have taken them, oui? But your grudge against Sir Reginald, it runs deep." Wilkins' storm-cloud eyes met Poirot's intent, unyielding. "I argued with him that night. He admitted, his voice rough. "He threatened to expose my poaching, but I left him alive." His psychological profile was one of brute strength and buried anger, his hands trembling with recent exertion. A scrap of his coat's fabric, found near the footprints, suggested involvement or another frame. As the afternoon waned, Poirot explored the manor's upper floors, his footsteps muffled by thick carpets. In the attic, he uncovered a locked trunk, forced open, containing letters that stunned him. Sir Reginald's affair with Eliza's sister, the true catalyst for her dismissal and death. The revelation recast Eliza's motive as personal vengeance, not mere resentment. But the letters also mentioned a secret fund, payments to E.T., not Eliza, but Edward Thorne, her late father, a former estate manager swindled by Sir Reginald. A red herring dispelled, but a new thread emerged. A commotion interrupted his thoughts, Lady Eleanor's cry from her boudoir. Poirot arrived to find her clutching a bloody glove found in her wardrobe. "It's not mine," she gasped, her composure shattered. The glove, too large for her delicate hands, suggested another plant. But whose? Arthur's? Lang's? Or a subtler hand? Poirot retreated to the terrace, the air now clear but heavy with the promise of another storm. The footprints, the silk, the cufflink, the glove, all were veils, obscuring the truth. Psychological patterns crystallized. Arthur's impulsivity, Lang's calculation, Eliza's rage, Wilkins' strength, Lady Eleanor's subtlety. The ledger's missing contents hinted at a larger conspiracy, perhaps a secret Sir Reginald had died to protect or expose. As evening approached, Poirot gathered his thoughts, his mustaches twitching with anticipation. "The killer," he murmured. "They weave a web of deception, but Hercule Poirot sees through the veils." The manor's shadows lengthened, and the game of deduction grew ever more intricate.
Chapter 5. The Web Tightens. The twilight descended over Blackwood Manor with a predatory grace, its bruised sky deepening to an inky violet that pressed against the manor's ancient stones like a velvet shroud. The storm's remnants lingered in the air, a damp chill that clung to the skin and sharpened the senses. Hercule Poirot, his dove-gray suit as immaculate as ever, stood in the shadowed corridor outside Sir Reginald Harrington's study, his emerald eyes glinting with the quiet intensity of a hunter closing in on his quarry. The murder of the steel magnate, stabbed through the heart with his own Damascus dagger, had woven a tapestry of deceit so intricate that even Poirot's little gray cells strained to unravel it. Yet, with each passing hour, the web of clues tightened, and the truth, elusive as a phantom, was beginning to take shape. The manor's interior was a labyrinth of secrets, its oak-paneled walls and faded tapestries whispering of betrayals old and new. The bloody footprints leading from the study to the garden, the emerald silk scrap, the monogrammed handkerchief, the bloody glove, all were threads in a carefully staged deception. Poirot's morning interrogations had painted a vivid portrait of the suspects. Lady Eleanor Harrington, her melancholy elegance masking suppressed passions; Arthur Harrington, a wastrel driven by desperation; Victor Lang, a calculating partner nursing a grudge; Eliza Thorne, a maid fueled by vengeful rage; and Tom Wilkins, a gardener whose buried anger simmered like a dormant volcano. Each bore a motive: money, revenge, betrayal, but the clues were a maze of red herrings, and Poirot knew the killer had crafted their alibi with meticulous care. He began the afternoon in the study, where the constable's rope barrier sagged like a defeated sentinel. The room, with its leather-bound tomes and colonial relics, was a shrine to Sir Reginald's domineering legacy. The blood-stained Persian rug had been covered with a tarp, but the air still carried the metallic tang of death. Poirot's gloved fingers traced the desk's edge, lingering on the forced compartment he'd discovered earlier. The ledger page with payments to E.T., Edward Thorne, Eliza's late father, had shifted his perspective. It suggested a deeper conspiracy, one Sir Reginald had either orchestrated or uncovered. But another detail caught his eye: a faint scratch on the desk, as if something heavy had been dragged across it. A hidden safe, perhaps? Poirot tapped the wood, his ear attuned to the hollow echo that confirmed his suspicion. With a deft twist, he located a concealed panel, revealing a small safe, locked but with scratches indicating a recent attempt to force it. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured. The killers sought more than Sir Reginald's life. The safe's contents, perhaps the missing ledger pages, could hold the key to the motive. He summoned the constable, Burrows, who arrived puffing and red-faced. "We'll need a locksmith," Poirot instructed, "but discreetly. The killer may yet be watching." Burrows nodded, scurrying off, while Poirot turned his attention to the French doors. The bloody footprints, too pristine for the storm's deluge, were a deliberate ruse, likely stamped post-mortem with Wilkins' boots. But who had access to the shed, and why choose the Damascus dagger, a weapon so intimately tied to Sir Reginald? Poirot stepped into the garden, the muddy path slick under his polished shoes. The footprints ended abruptly at the hedgerow, as if the killer had vanished. He knelt, examining the soil, and found a fresh clue: a single petal, crushed and vibrant red from a rare orchid grown only in the manor's greenhouse. Wilkins' domain, but also accessible to the household. A careless mistake, Poirot mused, pocketing the petal. The emerald silk scrap and Arthur's cufflink, found nearby, were too obvious, plants to mislead. But the orchid petal was subtler, a whisper of truth amid the deception. Returning inside, Poirot sought Eliza Thorne in the servants' quarters, where she was mending linens with a needle that trembled in her hands. Her broad, freckled face was set in a mask of deference, but her eyes betrayed fear. "Mademoiselle Thorne," Poirot began, his voice gentle yet piercing. "The letters in the attic, Sir Reginald's affair with your sister, a wound most profound, oui? And the payments to your father, Edward Thorne, did you know of his dealings with the master?" Eliza's needle paused, her breath catching. "I knew of my sister," she whispered, her voice raw. "He ruined her, cast her out to die. But my father? I thought he was just a manager." Her psychological profile was a cauldron of rage, her deference a fragile mask.
The mud on her sleeve, noted earlier, suggested she'd been in the garden, but her claim of fetching herbs held for now. Poirot pressed further. And the orchid petal, found near the footprints. Did you visit the greenhouse last night? Eliza's eyes widened, then dropped. I checked the plants sometimes. The master liked them tended. A plausible excuse, but her trembling suggested more. Next, Poirot found Victor Lang in the library, his wiry frame hunched over a ledger, though his pen lay idle. Monsieur Lang, Poirot said, the letter accusing you of embezzlement, Sir Reginald used it to control you, no? And your watch, stopped at 10:15, contradicts your claim of reading until 11. Lang's spectacles glinted, his lips a thin line. The watch stopped earlier, he said coolly. As for the letter, Reginald was the thief, not I. He doctored accounts to ruin me. His psychological profile was one of cold calculation, but the stopped watch was a damning inconsistency. Poirot noted a faint ink stain on his cuff, matching the desk's inkwell, suggesting he'd been in the study. And the handkerchief near the footprints, Poirot pressed. Stolen, he insisted, his gaze unflinching. But a flicker of unease betrayed him, a chess player caught off guard. Arthur Harrington was in the billiard room, his whiskey glass empty, his eyes bloodshot. Monsieur Arthur, Poirot began, the cuff-link in the garden, yours yet lost days ago, you say, and the housemaid places you near the study at 10. Your debts, your father's will, motives most compelling. Arthur's scowl deepened, his hands shaking. I was here, the cuff-link's a plant, and that made lies. I didn't kill him. His psychological profile was a storm of desperation, his impulsivity a liability. The will's condition, that he reform or lose his inheritance, was a noose, but the housemaid's testimony was unshaken. Poirot noted a fresh bruise on Arthur's knuckles, suggesting a recent scuffle, perhaps unrelated, or perhaps not.
Lady Eleanor was in the drawing-room, sketching at an easel, her delicate hands moving with mechanical grace. Her raven hair was loose now, framing her pale face like a mourning veil. "Madame," Poirot said, "the lavender perfume in the study, the silk scrap in the garden, both point to you. And your diary speaks of despair, of a lover in Paris. Did you seek freedom from your husband's tyranny?" Her pencil snapped, her emerald eyes meeting his with a flash of defiance. "I was in my boudoir," she said, her voice steady. "The silk tore when I walked the garden earlier. As for my diary, it's private." Her psychological profile revealed a woman of suppressed passions, her composure a mask for calculated fury. The bloody glove in her wardrobe, too large for her hands, was a plant, but by whom? Tom Wilkins was in the greenhouse, tending the orchids with a gentleness that belied his hulking frame. "Monsieur Wilkins," Poirot said, holding up the red petal, "this was found near the footprints. Your boots, your greenhouse, yet you claim the shed as your alibi." Wilkins' storm-cloud eyes darkened, his hands pausing on a pot. "I was in the shed. Anyone could have picked that petal. The greenhouse ain't locked." His psychological profile was one of buried anger, his trembling hands suggesting recent exertion. Poirot noted a fresh tear in Wilkins' coat, matching the fabric scrap near the footprints. "And your argument with Sir Reginald?" Poirot pressed. "He threatened to expose my poaching," Wilkins admitted, "but I left him alive." His alibi held, supported by the villager, but the torn fabric suggested involvement, or another frame. As evening loomed, Poirot retreated to the attic, where the letters about Sir Reginald's affair had been found. A closer search revealed a hidden journal, Sir Reginald's own, detailing his discovery of a poaching ring led by Wilkins, and a plan to disinherit Arthur for his debts. The journal also mentioned a secret fund, siphoned from Lang's shares, and payments to Edward Thorne, insurance, perhaps, against betrayal. The web tightened.
Eliza's vengeance was personal, Arthur's desperation acute, Lang's grudge financial, Wilkins' anger primal, and Lady Eleanor's motives tangled in love and liberation. A breakthrough came when Poirot re-examined the study. The scratches on the safe suggested a hurried attempt to open it, but the lock held. Using a hairpin from Lady Eleanor's boudoir, borrowed with her reluctant consent, Poirot picked the lock, revealing a bundle of documents. The missing ledger pages, detailing payments to Edward Thorne for falsified estate records, and a letter from a Parisian artist addressed to Lady Eleanor, promising a new life. The documents confirmed motives but muddied the waters. Each suspect had cause to kill, yet none stood alone. Poirot paced the terrace, the twin moons of Devonshire casting an ethereal glow. The footprints, he realized, were a distraction, stamped post-mortem to implicate Wilkins. The dagger's choice was intimate, suggesting someone close to Sir Reginald. The silk, the cufflink, the glove, all were plants, but the orchid petal was a genuine mistake. "The killer," Poirot murmured. "They weave a web, but the threads betray them." As evening fell, Poirot gathered his thoughts, the Manor's shadows lengthening like fingers reaching for the truth. The web was tightening, and the killer's mask would soon slip.
Chapter 6. The Grand Revelation. The drawing-room of Blackwood Manor glowed with the sombre warmth of a dying fire, its flickering light casting long, wavering shadows across the crimson damask walls. The storm had abated, leaving a heavy silence that pressed against the leaded windows, as if the night itself held its breath. It was September 1935, and Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the room, his dove-grey suit pristine, his waxed moustaches gleaming under the chandelier's muted prisms. His emerald eyes swept over the assembled suspects, each a thread in the intricate web of deceit that had culminated in Sir Reginald Harrington's murder. The air was thick with anticipation, a palpable tension that coiled around the room like a serpent poised to strike. The little grey cells, Poirot's indomitable intellect, had unravelled the tapestry of clues. Bloody footprints, emerald silk, a monogrammed handkerchief, a bloody glove, an orchid petal, and now the moment of revelation had arrived. The suspects sat in a semicircle, their faces a gallery of unease. Lady Eleanor Harrington, her porcelain features composed yet taut. Arthur Harrington, slouched and sullen, his eyes bloodshot. Victor Lang, rigid behind his spectacles, his fingers steepled like a strategist. Eliza Thorne, clutching her apron, her freckled face pale. And Tom Wilkins, looming at the room's edge, his storm-cloud eyes unreadable. The constable, Burrows, stood by the door, his ruddy face a mask of deference to Poirot's authority. The fire crackled, a solitary sound in the oppressive quiet, as Poirot began, his voice a calm anchor in the storm of suspicion. "Mes amis," he said, his Belgian accent precise, "the murder of Sir Reginald Harrington was no act of impulse, but a performance staged with the cunning of a master. The truth it hides in the shadows of human nature, but Hercule Poirot sees all. Tonight we shall unveil the killer." His words hung in the air, each syllable a note in a symphony of deduction. The suspects shifted, their glances darting. Arthur to his mother, Lang to the floor, Eliza to her hands, Wilkins to the window. Lady Eleanor's lips parted, but she said nothing, her emerald eyes locked on Poirot. "Let us begin with the scene," Poirot continued, pacing with theatrical deliberation, his hands clasped behind his back. "Sir Reginald, stabbed through the heart with his own Damascus dagger, a weapon of intimacy known to those closest to him.
The bloody footprints, masculine and heavy, leading to the garden, were too pristine for the storm's deluge, suggesting they were stamped post-mortem, a ruse to mislead. The rifled desk, the emerald silk, the cufflink, the glove, the orchid petal, all threads in a web of deception. But the little grey cells, they see through the veils. He turned to Arthur, whose scowl deepened. Monsieur Arthur, your debts, your father's will, motives most compelling. The cufflink, engraved with an A, found in the garden, points to you. Yet it is too obvious, no? A plant, to cast suspicion. Your alibi, the billiard room with no cigar ash, crumbles, and the housemaid places you near the study at 10. But your impulsivity, it lacks the subtlety of this crime. Arthur's fists clenched, his voice a growl. I didn't do it! Someone's framing me! Poirot nodded, his eyes gleaming. Précisément. The frame is clear, but not your guilt. Next, Poirot faced Victor Lang, whose spectacles glinted like a predator's eyes. Monsieur Lang, your handkerchief, monogrammed VL, near the footprints, stolen, you claim. Your watch, stopped at 10:15, contradicts your library alibi. And the letter accusing you of embezzlement, Sir Reginald's leverage over you. Revenge, it is a motive cold and calculated, like your nature. Yet the inkstain on your cuff places you in the study, but not necessarily at the moment of murder. Lang's lips twitched, his voice cool. I was framed, Poirot. Reginald was the thief, not I. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Perhaps, monsieur, but the truth lies deeper. Eliza Thorne flinched as Poirot turned to her. Mademoiselle Thorne, your sister's ruin, your father's betrayal. The letters in the attic reveal a personal vendetta. The beetroot stains, mistaken for blood, are a convenient alibi. But the mud on your sleeve places you in the garden. The orchid petal from the greenhouse suggests your presence. Yet your rage, it is fierce, but restrained. Did you wield the dagger? Eliza's hands twisted her apron, her voice trembling. I hated him, sir, but I didn't kill him. I swear it. Poirot's gaze softened, but his mind was unrelenting. Your heart speaks truth, perhaps, but the clues, they whisper otherwise. Tom Wilkins stood rigid as Poirot addressed him. Monsieur Wilkins, your boots match the prints precisely, yet you claim the shed. The torn fabric from your coat, the orchid petal, both point to you. Your grudge, the eviction of your family, the poaching ring Sir Reginald threatened to expose, these are motives primal and raw. But the villager's alibi holds, and the prints, they are staged. Were you framed or complicit? Wilkins' eyes darkened, his voice rough. I argued with him, but I didn't kill him. Someone used my boots. Poirot nodded, his moustaches twitching. A frame, oui, but by whose hand? Finally, Poirot turned to Lady Eleanor, whose composure wavered under his gaze. Madame, the emerald silk from your gown, the lavender perfume in the study, the bloody glove in your wardrobe, all point to you. Your diary speaks of despair, your letters of a Parisian lover, a motive for freedom from a tyrannical husband. The servant's stair, so close to your boudoir, offers a discreet path. Yet your elegance, it masks a fury most calculated. Lady Eleanor's hands trembled, her voice a whisper. I did not harm him, Monsieur Poirot. The glove, the silk, they are not mine. Her eyes, brimming with tears, suggested sincerity or a masterful performance. Poirot paced, his hands gesturing like a conductor. Let us reconstruct the fatal evening. Sir Reginald retires to his study at 9, after the dinner's discord. At 10, he is stabbed through the heart, the dagger driven with force and precision. The footprints are stamped later, using Monsieur Wilkins' boots from the shed to suggest a fleeing killer. The desk is rifled, the safe forced, papers taken, perhaps the ledger pages revealing secrets. The silk, the cufflink, the glove, the orchid petal, all are plants designed to scatter suspicion. But the orchid petal, it is a mistake, a clue unscripted. He paused, his eyes sweeping the room. The dagger, it is the key. Why choose so distinctive a weapon? It speaks of intimacy, of one who knew its place in the study. The footprints, they implicate Wilkins, but their clarity betrays staging. The safe's contents, ledger pages, a letter, point to a motive beyond passion. And the orchid petal, from the greenhouse, narrows the field.
Poirot stopped before Lady Eleanor, his voice soft yet relentless. "Madame, you are the weaver of this web. Your husband's tyranny, his affair with Eliza's sister, his threats to disinherit Arthur, his blackmail of Lang, these you knew. You planned his death, not in rage, but with cold precision. You descended the servants' stair, unseen at 10. You took the dagger, a weapon you knew well, and struck. Then you staged the scene. The footprints, using Wilkins' boots, the silk, torn from an old gown, the glove, planted in your wardrobe to feign a frame. The orchid petal fell unnoticed, a careless slip from your visit to the greenhouse where you planned the deception." Lady Eleanor's face drained of colour, her hands clutching her shawl. "No," she whispered, but her voice faltered. Poirot pressed on. "The ledger pages, you took them, knowing they implicated others. The letter from your Parisian lover, found in the safe, promised a new life. Your alibi, reading in your boudoir, was unchallenged, but the lavender perfume betrays your presence in the study. Psychologically, your composure is a mask, your despair a motive transformed into action." The room was silent, the fire's crackle a distant echo. Arthur's jaw dropped, Lang's spectacles glinted, Eliza's hands stilled, Wilkins' eyes widened. Lady Eleanor rose, her elegance crumbling. "He was a monster," she gasped, tears streaming. "He crushed me, my art, my soul. I wanted freedom, for me, for Arthur. I did it." Her confession shattered the silence, a raw admission of guilt. Poirot's expression softened, but his voice was firm. "Madame, justice is not vengeance. The law shall judge you." He signalled to Burroughs, who stepped forward, his face grim. As Lady Eleanor was led away, her sobs echoed in the hall, a lament for a life undone. The suspects dispersed, their faces a mix of shock and relief. Poirot stood alone by the fire, his moustaches drooping slightly. The human heart, it is a labyrinth most profound, but Hercule Poirot brings light to its shadows. The manor settled into silence, the truth unveiled, the web unravelled. The game was over, but the echoes of deception lingered in the air.
Thank you, dear listener, for joining this gentle journey tonight. May the story's quiet mystery and comforting atmosphere stay with you as you drift deeper into peaceful rest. Remember, there will always be another tale waiting for you here, ready to soothe, to comfort, and to carry you into sweet dreams. Until next time, sleep well, rest deeply, and good night.